Test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Audio for TV and or radio. No. I need to turn on the transmitter. Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you want me to wait for you, John, or do you have audio? All right.
It's cute. Yeah. Push your brother away for a while. I'm going to try to start on time. That looks like they did a mirror image of all the pictures.
When you look at them, what you sent me,
Yeah.
they put them like that, is what you said. So it's, his back is, and it's this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he's standing like this.
Right, right.
When were these taken?
What?
When were these taken?
This was probably, I believe, the next day after this, so June 21st or 22nd.
21st or 22nd? After the release?
Yes.
Yeah, this stuff like pretty nasty bruise for a while. I can imagine.
Surprised they did this as quickly as
I guess we might as well start. I, for some reason, didn't get notice out very well to several of our media markets, and I don't do press conferences, and I apologize for that. So I've been stalling a little bit, but there's no reason to do that any longer. My name is Greg Skordas, and I am Arturo's attorney. This is Arturo Gamboa. This is associate in my office named Jim Tiley, T-I-L-Y. And I know none of you came here today to see me, so I'll keep my remarks short. And I want to say something in prefatory with respect to the Utah State Bar Office. We contacted them so that we could use their facility, and they were kind enough to let us use it. But this is in no way a bar activity or endorsed by the bar, or I don't know, I'm supposed to give a disclaimer. So that was a disclaimer. We use their building because it's convenient and it works out well, and it's bigger than my conference room in my law office. I also want to say something else, because a lot of you that I see and recognize in the room here today have been asking me, knowing that I was Arturo's attorney, if you could talk to him or if you could interview him. And I appreciate your patience, but I'm a criminal defense lawyer. That's what I do for the most part. And the old saying, anything you say can and will be used against you, is an understatement. And with that backdrop, I didn't see any reason for Arturo to give a statement, even to you all, who I trust, all of you, until the investigation was done by the DA's office. And so I hope you will forgive me, but I couldn't let Arturo speak until the investigation was over at the DA's office. And it was a painfully long investigation, but it came to a good conclusion. And I applaud the DA's office for their investigation and for their hard work and for the fact that they got to a point where, admittedly, I thought they should have gotten to 4 months ago. I got involved in this case shortly after the event occurred and went and saw Arturo in the Salt Lake County Jail. It was probably, I don't know, he'd been in for a couple of days. And what was troubling about that for me personally, just as an attorney practicing law for 43 years, is when Arturo came out to visit with me, I saw something I'd never seen before, period. And that was a man who was cuffed with his hand, and he's in jail. He's not going anywhere. He's cuffed with his hands. His legs are cuffed. His hands are cuffed to his waist, and he's got a leash. He's wearing a leash. And I thought, he's in jail. I don't get it. And at the same time, he's got a bullet hole going through him. And we talked, and he's just such a sincere man. He's such a wonderful man. And it's the first and only time he's ever been in jail. And it's the last time he's ever going to be in jail. I mean, he's a good kid. He's a good man. He's not somebody that's out committing crime. And I wrote this thing that I gave you all because you don't want me to get on my soapbox, and so I'll just leave it at that, because this case troubled me from the start on so many levels that I felt like I had to put something together. I wanted to explain some of what I've got behind me, and then I'll turn the time over to Arturo. When I saw Arturo in the jail, he showed me this bullet hole, and this is an innie and this is an outie. This is an entry wound and exit wound from a bullet, from a 9mm handgun. And if you look, this is Arturo's back and side. There's an angle, and the reason for that angle, and I'm not a forensic expert, but I've done this for a few years, is because Arturo's bent down when he's shot. He's running for his life when he's shot. He's not standing up like I am right now. And that's the angle that you would expect from someone shooting someone who's running away. That angle is shot. It's not a flesh wound. It's not a flesh wound. It's a penetrating wound. And this is a little better shot of it and another one. And another thing I wanted to show you was Arturo was actually shot twice. This is one shot, obviously. He was also shot, the DA described that his gun was shot. Well, he was holding the gun, and it busted up his finger. So that he was shot twice, and then, according to the DA, and I think that it's corroborated by the evidence, there was a third shot fired, which ultimately killed Afa Alu, who hadn't done anything wrong. Interestingly, after this event occurred, we all knew that there was a peacekeeper, and his name was kept quiet for a long period of time for whatever reason, who was the only person who fired a gun. Arturo never fired a gun. There's no question about that. He didn't even have a loaded gun. There's no question about that. Everyone knows that. And he was lawfully carrying a gun under Utah law. Now, I don't advise carrying guns in this fashion, and I can understand why it caused some concern. But what caused some concern in this case wasn't that Arturo was carrying a gun so much as a large Hispanic man was carrying a gun. And I'll just say that and then probably move on so I don't get in trouble. But after the event, the shooter, the person who actually killed Afa Alu, was not taken into custody. Nothing happened to him. In fact, we're at almost 6 months and he's still never been taken into custody. Arturo was taken into custody. He was taken to the Salt Lake County Jail and booked into jail for murder, first-degree murder. I wrote on my paper it carries 5 to life. It actually carries 25 years to life. And a judge looked at the case and said, I'm going to set no bail. In other words, you're not going anywhere, Arturo. And they filed murder charges, knowing he'd never fired a gun, knowingly he'd never put a bullet in the gun, knowing he'd been shot in the back, but he's booked into jail on murder charges. When I saw him, he was in jail, like I say, cuffed to a fare thee well. It was awful. And under Utah law, and most states follow the same model, when a person is taken into custody, the authorities have a certain period of time to charge them. They can't just hold somebody in jail without charges. Makes sense. In fact, charges almost 6 months later haven't been filed against Arturo. So he never, in my opinion, should have gone to jail, but he did. And after this event occurred on the 14th, the district attorney's office filed a motion to extend his jail hold on June 19th. It was 5 days later. A motion saying, Judge, we need a little more time to decide what we're going to do. Which, by the way, is not necessarily uncommon, but it was troublesome in this case to me because I didn't feel like he should have been in jail in the first place. But what they did was they asked the judge to keep him in jail with no bail until they could figure out what they wanted to do. And the judge granted it. Said, sure, take another week or so. We became frustrated with that, and I did something that I haven't done in my 43 years, and we filed what in fancy terms you'd call a writ of habeas corpus, but it's called a request for extraordinary relief. The next day, this was filed on June 20th, and it said, Judge, let him out. The district attorney's office didn't file a motion to get him out. They never filed a motion to get him out. They filed a motion to keep him in. We filed a motion to get him out, and to their credit, the district attorney's office read our motion and said, we probably need to get this guy out of jail. But in my opinion, had we not filed a motion to get him out, Arturo would have spent much, much, much longer in jail. Maybe another month. Maybe he would have been released last week when the district attorney gave his press conference, but he wasn't going anywhere. The judge did sign his release, but there were conditions to the release. And I just wanted you to have these documents, and we can get them to you. But one of the conditions were, we agreed to these with the DA's office, that he be supervised by pretrial. It's an agency you call every day, you check in, they check on how you're doing. That he had to live with his father. And Arturo at the time was living back and forth between his mother and father. And he'd call me and go, can I go to mom's house? And I would say, yeah, just don't tell anybody. And he's like, well, I don't want to get in trouble. So he didn't. I mean, the kid was, he was amazing. I mean, he'd go visit her, but he slept at Dad's house. And then they said, don't possess any firearms. And for whatever reason, the judge, who didn't want to let him out, who was looking at us like, why are we doing this, wrote in here, this is a zero tolerance condition, and then signed it. We didn't ask for that. The DAs didn't ask for that. The judge said, zero tolerance. Don't possess any firearms, and really seriously don't possess any firearms. And then turned in his passport to me. Apparently I still have it, but I'll get it to you. And then Arturo was released. But he was released under conditions. He had to check in. He was still under the auspices, I guess, or the hooks, I guess, of the system. Couldn't go very far. And Arturo, he's a, I know I told you I'd just talk for 2 minutes. I'm already well over, but I'm wrapping it up here. He's a guy that follows the rules. So he's like, he was literally paralyzed by this activity for 5 months. He couldn't move on with his life in the way that we all do. And I kept telling him, go back to work, go to school, go back. He loves his music. Do the things you do. But he was frozen. He was paralyzed. And so it was a huge relief for us when the district attorneys came to the correct decision to not charge him last week. It was no surprise that Mr. Alder, the shooter, was charged with a manslaughter for shooting Afa Alu. But I felt, and I still do, that this was a crime. And I was a prosecutor for 8 years. I don't know anything about the law, but I know that. This is an aggravated assault. In my opinion, this is an aggravated assault. In my opinion. An assault with the use of deadly weapon, an assault that causes serious bodily injury. So the district attorney's office could have charged 2 other counts. They didn't. We don't have any right to appeal those decisions anyway. They do whatever they want. But that's what they decided to do, and we will live with that consequence. And I just felt personally as an attorney that those are charges that could have been filed, and that Arturo was also a victim because he's been treated a little bit like a perpetrator rather than a victim. And you asked the district attorney at the press conference, I'm talking to Daniela, why Arturo wasn't treated as a victim. And the district attorney said, well, we didn't think we could charge him with a crime because of this, and didn't really appreciate the question, why he wasn't a defendant. But anyway, I do want Arturo to be able to speak. And by the way, he's here, but a lot of you want to talk to him in different capacities, and he's willing to do that. He will either stick around or he'll go meet with you at your studio. I mean, I think that he's ready to come out and talk and do what he needs to do. And I love Arturo. I really come to respect what a great man he is. And he's had no prior involvement with the law before. I would just say that sometimes we, including me, could look at a person and judge them differently because of things that we see and act in ways that we probably wouldn't otherwise. And that's why I wrote my little thing there, and I'll leave it at that. So I'm going to, unless there are questions of me, and I can't imagine there'd be any interesting ones, I'll turn it over to Arturo. Thank you. You're up, boss.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to thank everybody who's come here to support me and who has continued to support me. Everybody who has given their time, their energy, everything that is within their capacity to try and bring justice for me, who has tried to dispel the false narrative of what has been tried to be placed upon me as a person, as far as my intentions. So I first would like to express a great gratitude to everybody who is here, to my family, my friends, my community. I would also like to give very deep condolences to the family of Mr. Alu. I pray for their healing. I pray that God replaces their grief and their pain with remembrance, because Afa will be missed, and believe that things will never be the same without him. Believe that he should still be here today. But I am not used to giving speeches in this sort of environment. The conditions under which I normally speak are quite different. Tend to be the same conditions that of community organizing, protesting, and the like. So I'm going to do my absolute best in this circumstance. I'd like to answer some of your questions if you have any. I'm sure there are quite a few. And yeah.
Can you explain in your own words what you were doing that day? Why put together that gun and bring it with you to the protest? Can you clear the air, explain in your own words what was going on?
Yes, sir. That day, as I had participated in countless other events without any incident, the only thing that I was doing was engaging in my First and Second Amendment rights under the United States Constitution, under the constitutional carry laws of the Utah State. I believe that it is the right of every person, without restriction, to utilize their constitutional rights. And the Second Amendment right is not a right that is restricted to any particular political ideology, any particular viewpoint, any particular race, ethnicity, creed, gender. So it's exactly what I was doing. Peacefully protesting, utilizing my First and Second Amendment rights under the Constitution.
In light of what happened, would you do it again if there's another march?
He asked if he would do it again.
I believe that the conditions would need to be correct in order for that to be a possibility. I think that under those circumstances there, that an organization that is not of the people, that is not in true connection to the community, that puts the safety of the community at risk by refusing to collaborate with other organizations for necessary training, de-escalation, and the like, believe that it would be, under the right circumstances, I could see it being a possibility. But in regards to that specific organization,
So do you believe that that organization should have had the armed peacekeepers there?
well, the national chapter themselves would say that they shouldn't have had them there. That's the main reason why they made the split. The very moment that whoever was on the coordinating team for the security, for the defense, allowed there to be armed people. I mean, as citizens of Utah State, as United States American citizens, they have the Second Amendment right, absolutely. However, anybody who has engaged in protesting, who has engaged in community organizing, understands that you do not go outside of the confines of what your specific organization dictates on a local level and on a national level. So their very having that armed brigade was a violation of the very organization's hardline policies, meaning that from the jump, it should not have been present. If they were to have been armed as individuals, that's one thing. However, if you are going to attempt to represent your organization and you are disobeying the very hardline rules of your local chapter, of your national chapter, of your state chapter, then you are violating the very rules set in place by your own organization that you claim to represent. And in that regard, you are acting outside of that, and you are acting as a lone asset.
So final question, so do you plan any legal action, civil action against either the organizers or Mr. Alder or anyone like that?
What we don't want to do is hurt any possibility that Afa Alu and his family can recover whatever damages that they're entitled to. And so if there's a pot of money out there somewhere, Arturo recognizes that Afa Alu ought to have first shot at that. And I don't know what's available. We do know that Arturo, and I'm sorry I cut you off, bro,
Not a problem.
but is now saddled with significant medical debt, 5-figure medical debt. And we'll do what we can to get that back, but right now, we will continue to work with the Alu family lawyers and see what they intend to do. If they say, stay out of this until we finish, that's exactly what we will do.
Has already been in contact with them?
Yes. And have been.
Your attorney has kind of inferred that there was bias present in the way you were treated by police immediately after this. Do you feel like there was racial bias in the events that day after the shooting?
Well, the unfortunate reality, whether people would like to admit it or not, is that the history of this nation is rooted in that very bias. Every step along the way, there has never been a time where Black, brown, Asian, Pacific Islander communities have been able to resist the immense oppression and exploitation against them, and even working class white people have not been able to resist the exploitation against them without there being an immense bias. I have no doubt in my mind that that played a factor, because that has always played a factor, again, whether people would like to admit it or not. The very incarceration system as it stands is judicial slavery that transitioned from a chattel form into the privatization of filling jails and prisons with Black and brown bodies. In that regard, once again, if you look back into the 60s with the Black Panther movement, their right to self-defense, their legal carrying of firearms was treated as some sort of terroristic threat rather than their citizenship rights. So in that regard, there's a very large hypocrisy that I think that people either are aware of and would not like to admit, or are completely unaware of and need to be made aware. And that's partially what I do in the work that I do.
How do you feel about the way the system treated you versus the way it's currently treating Mr. Alder, and the fact that you've spent time in jail, he hasn't?
Well, I think that anybody who is aware of the circumstances of this case can see exactly for themselves. I don't need to speculate or come up with some idea of it. You can see it plainly in your face. The very day I was treated as the perpetrator of the potential mass casualty event, that my intentions were to, quote, mag dump into the crowd, that I was there with the intention to harm others. And then that very day, I mean, from the moment that everything happened, I was treated as a psychopathic villain. I was handcuffed. The very moment that I was put into handcuffs, I was not out of handcuffs until I was in the jail and occasionally getting the medical triage, and then even then. The most time that I spent unhandcuffed outside of chains was within the confines of a maximum security cell. So in that regard, even in the days following, every step along the way, the entire thing has been that the understanding that I did not shoot anybody, I did not fire a single shot, I did not have any ammunition in the rifle. However, the blame was placed squarely on my shoulders. The news organizations, the media, created a false narrative and created something so that they could make their own profit, so that they could make their speculatory gestures, so that they could get their headlines off of my name, my face, even in the few futile attempts of trying to defend me. They would still even use verbiage that is deeply biased, and that still painted me out to be the perpetrator of something, or that I had the intention of being the perpetrator of something. We all know who the person that killed Arthur was that day. Plain and simply. We all know the only person who drew their firearm, aimed it, and fired it into a crowd of people, who recklessly discharged their firearm, who had the intention of murdering me, and who did murder Mr. Alu.
Do you feel like he should be charged for shooting you?
I think that there is a litany of things that could be placed upon. For all of the blame that was put upon me, for all of the gymnastics, all of the mental gymnastics that people tried to play, reasonably, if we were to go in the area of event, you could say brandishing of a firearm, reckless endangerment of the public, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, and manslaughter. However, I understand that because in many areas of this case, a lot of people have been trying to save face and have been trying to ping pong responsibility and make themselves look good, have been trying to obfuscate themselves of any sort of accountability and responsibility within these circumstances, that the likelihood of it, whether I would like anything or not, the reality of the situation is that you will see those biases once again in the leniency that is shown to the perpetrator rather than what was shown to me.
Do you think the Salt Lake City Police Department owes you an apology for reputational harm?
I think there are a lot of people that owe me an apology, that owe my family an apology, that owe the community an apology. I think there are a lot of things, and even further than an apology, I think the ultimate thing that many in the organizing space really want is not the platitudes, is not the comfortability of things. What we want and what we consistently demand is change. I do not think that, I don't truly see any, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't move me in any way for a simple, something that still makes them look good, something that still makes other people who were perpetrators in this circumstance, who falsified a narrative, who slandered my name, who slandered my family. I don't see, it would be nice. And I think that there are a lot of people who would do right by themselves for their own conscience, for their own humanity, for their own morality, to do the right thing and to apologize, because there are still people, even on a mass scale level, on a national level, on an international level, who are still trying to run with a false narrative that obfuscates the responsibility from the true perpetrator of the circumstance. Would it be nice? Yeah. But once again, I understand that were I to receive that it would be very hollow, because at the end of the day, there have been many people like me, and I believe that so long as there remains to not be a consistent and material change within these structures, within these systems that govern our lives, I believe that there will be far more of me. That's the unfortunate reality of the carceral system within the United States, is that many times people look to the visual aspect, something that is aesthetically pleasing, something that makes them feel good at the end of the day. Even in certain protest circumstances, there are certain, quote, movements or certain rallies that are there and organized by people who are not of the community, people who are funded not by the community, people whose leadership is not of the community, that simply go there in order to release the steam vent, if you will, from what the people really want, which is the pressure towards material change. We want change in our communities. We don't want something that only makes those in power who are still exploiting the community, who are still exploiting people, who are still oppressing people. It's the equivalent of various police officers and stations taking a knee in solidarity with people after unjustifiable police murders. It makes them look good, it makes them feel good. However, the reality is, how honest is it? How true is it? Do they really mean it? And if they are honest in what they claim, will they change? What I would like to see is true change. I think what a lot of people would like to see within these systems, within these structures of society, is change. That's what we were all there to initially demand in the first place, was change.
Arturo, you just laid out so much of what you faced 6 or 7 days in detention, nearly 6 months after that, waiting for a charging decision. How do you describe what it's like to carry that burden for as long as you did?
I believe that in many ways it is indescribable. I think that the reality of the circumstances is that the only other people who could possibly begin to understand what it feels like are other revolutionaries and other people who have fought for community organization who have been put into that same regard. For example, the former A-Trap Brown, Imam Jamil Alamin, recently died within the concrete plantation of a prison cell for a crime that he didn't commit. To have to hold on your shoulders the weight of false narrative of the psychopathic shooter who had intentions of mag dumping into a crowd, who had intentions of doing something, who was the reason behind the circumstance. Oh, he was dressed in all black, he had foul intentions, things like that. When you know the reality of the circumstance, when you are blamed with the loss of life, the loss of soul of a human being, and you know in your mind that you didn't do it. However, every step along the way, wherever you are, it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter if you can look into the eyes of somebody who sees killers, who sees robbers and things every single day in and out of those cells, and you look them in the eye and say, do you see that in me? Doesn't matter, because they're doing their job. And whether or not that job is right, moral, just, they are taking orders. So at the end of the day, how can one really feel when you are put onto an international basis? This has gone far beyond the state of Utah. This is national and international at this point. And there will continue to be people who, even after having the facts shown in their face, will still refuse to believe the reality of the circumstance. At a certain point, I understand that I can only do so much to change people's perception. The truth stands alone. The truth needs no crutch. The truth needs no amplification. Truth is a weed. You don't need to water it. It'll grow on its own. It's very similar to revolutionary inspiration in that way, in that people don't need to be pushed and forced in the direction of change. They will desire it themselves once they see it. But to have to carry it, to sit in a 5x10 cell with a fresh bullet wound, being treated as a criminal, being treated as some sort of psychopathic madman who created the circumstance that got somebody killed, and to know at the end of the day that all you really wanted to do was try and do something good for your community. I don't think that I could sit and try and explain for hours, day by day, minute by minute, hour by hour, exactly how it felt. And at the end of the day, I don't think people would really realize the true gravity of it, the true weight of it, because it was that intense. When I say that those circumstances are judicial slavery, it is exactly that. Being held handcuffs to waist chain with leg cuffs, being led on a chain leash. I was just outside of my cell so that I could get a saline swab on a fresh bullet wound and get a fabric Band-Aid with not even so much as a Tylenol or an ibuprofen, to then have to just go back and try and take a nap to wait for the next meal, because the food in those facilities is not anything that's fit for human consumption whatsoever. But it's through patience and through the grace of God, I made it through every single day. But I can tell you this, that I think that it would break anybody's heart, that it does irreparable damage to your psyche to have never had encounters with police outside of trying to demand justice for oppression and wrongdoings, but to never have been in a jail facility, to never have been into a prison, to then be chained and bound and having to call your family on the phone, bending down, holding the bottom of the receiver so that you can try and get a word in, to talk to others in those facilities and to have them go, man, what are you doing here? It's like, what? There's no way. It's, I believe that to answer the question of how it feels to carry that burden, I think that it would require much more time than we have here, unfortunately. But at some point, I would like to do my best to fully materialize exactly how that feels. At the end of the day, I don't think that people would. Unfortunately, there's a large percentage of people who don't care and who think that that would be a good thing, but it's indescribable. It is. You were treated as an animal. You were treated less than human every step of the way. But in that regard, I actually would like to give my appreciation to the nurse who helped me the day of the incident in the facility, who was the only person that entire day who treated me as a human being, who saw my humanity, who saw a scared person, who saw somebody who had no ill intent, and who treated me as such, who treated me as a human being. Because every step along that entire process, I was treated as, I was made to be the convenient Charles Manson figure, so that other people could shift the blame.
In accounts from people who were interviewed that day, including Mr. Alder, we've seen that they've said to law enforcement, well, we yelled at him to drop the weapon, he didn't respond, we're telling him to drop the weapon. Do you remember hearing anyone yelling at you about your gun? Did you hear that? And is that an order you would have followed from someone who was in a reflective vest and not a police officer?
Well, once again, that's the reality of the situation. When we were discussing the armed security team that day, they had no right to be making those commands of anybody, regardless of the circumstances. Honestly, it's irrelevant because they were in no position of authority to be giving out those orders. If anybody else in that crowd would have been wearing a yellow vest, then they would have had just as much legal authority as anybody else. A person, if I were to walk into a Sprouts grocery store or something like that, the cash out lady, the person who's bagging groceries would have more of an authority to tell somebody else when and where to carry, and if they are carrying, to get them out. The reality of the circumstance is that was not in their job description. And if it was, then that responsibility falls on whoever coordinated that specific team. But the reality of the circumstance is that regardless of that scenario, they were in no position to be giving commands of anybody.
The organizers of that rally, I don't believe have been publicly named. It is apparent that a name was used for the permit application.
Michael Anderman.
That is not a real person who organized this protest.
Yeah.
Do you feel there should be some accountability for those organizers? How do you feel about that?
Well, yes. I mean, in many areas, specifically, I mean, in regards to my political ideology and the political ideology of many of the people that I work with, one of the big things is criticism and self-criticism, as far as you are very deeply encouraged to understand your faults, to try and take accountability when you have done wrong, to answer for the things that you have fallen short in. And that is not always we try and push past and see outside of simply a carceral punishment system. However, at the end of the day, that in and of itself tells you that that organization is not of the community, is not of the people. It is not run and put together by the people, or else you would have seen a true accountability. Had it been any other organization that I've priorly been involved with or worked with, that day, things would have been made right. However, even now, today, people are still trying to run, hide, shift the blame, ping pong responsibility. There are people that are jumping ship and creating new organizations under different names that are trying to hide themselves within the community, who put the people into such a dangerous position, who made such poor decisions, who refused collaboration with organizations that did have that vital knowledge, such as the Utah Socialist Rifle Association, that on their own website admitted that they that they offered their help, they offered training. Various organizations did, but whoever was in charge refused. In that, I would say that it is very dangerous for the community and to be wary of anybody who was involved, who is now trying to duck under the covers and then put themselves into a different situation and distance themselves, being like, oh, no, I don't know, wasn't me, look over that. I believe that's very dangerous for the community. So as far as should the organizers be held responsible, I mean, whoever decided to go against the national chapter's hardline policy of no handguns, of no firearms, their person who was acting under whoever the security defenses coordinator was obviously didn't get the memo, or they did get the memo and they chose to go against it. Either way, I mean, the responsibility does lie in some capacity with the organizers, with the group. I don't think that that can be denied.
I know you were asked if you would carry a gun to a protest again in the future, but I'm curious just about protesting in general. It seems like demonstrating is a big part of who you are. Do
Absolutely.
you plan to continue that?
Once again, I think that it would be very circumstantial. I do not see any benefit in what is pretty much in any demonstration or protest that could be classified as a glorified parade. If the object of the protest is simply for the mild or moderate to go out there in their cute little uniform and to hold up a witty sign, and then at the end of the day just crawl back into comfortability and privilege, I don't see that as being fruitful in making a real material change to the people, in making a real material change to the community. I would like to obviously do whatever is in my capacity to branch out and do mutual aid organizing, distributing food, distributing clothing, doing whatever it is in my capacity. As, you know, at the end of the day, my goal with my life is to be able to do whatever is in my capacity with the gifts that God has given me and continues to give me and grant me each and every single day to make a positive change within this world. At the end of the day, I understand that I will have to be accountable for everything that I've done. And I think that there are a lot of people who, and it's not for me to judge, but I think that many of us fall short in that regard. Many people claim to have a certain faith and a certain belief, but at the end of the day, are we feeding the hungry? Are we giving clean water to drink? Are we protecting the earth? Are we cleaning the waterways? Are we trying to keep the air clean? Are we watching over the wildlife? Our duty, my belief is that our duty as human beings, as humanity, is to be stewards of the earth, to maintain a good relationship with all of the creatures of the earth, and to look after our brotherhood of humanity. And in that regard, we must put ourselves on the line in saying that because you are my brother, I will fight to the very bitter end if it means that I will protect you, if it means that I can better your situation. One of the main things that is across all faiths and beliefs is that you should fight for the oppressed, to end exploitation wherever it stands, to do good, to make a positive change. So whatever can be done in my capacity to do so, I fully intend on doing.
All right, you talked about wanting change. Are there specific changes that you'd like to see within Salt Lake City or Utah after everything you experienced?
Well, I think that's another thing that would be, how much time do you got? But no, the reality of the circumstance is that this brings up a good point as far as when I was in the facility, and my big kudos and my appreciation goes out to the brother within who was fighting to get better conditions, who was fighting to get better food, who was doing the paperwork and doing the long-standing work to try and better the conditions within the jail facility. However, I even talked to my cellmate that at the end of the day, the reality is that on a grand scale level, we have a lot of things that we need to fix. First of all, one of the largest things in regards to the carceral system in general is that we need to end slavery. The reality is that slavery is still legal under the United States Constitution, under the 13th Amendment, and that slavery is legal as punishment of crime. We have not abolished slavery. I believe that once we do that, then we can address the root causes of crime, that we can address the root causes of incidents, and that we can actually make a material change. However, the reality of that also is that a lot more people would be making a lot less money. Change for the people and good things for the community. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, but it's not good for the businessman. It's not good for the CEO. It's not good for the profiteer. So I see a lot of changes that could be made. I see a lot of trash on the street that could be picked up. I see a lot of gas stations and coffee shops that are filled with a lot of officers who are not doing much of anything. I see a lot of people sitting homeless on the street when we have more than enough resources in order to actually give material aid to people. We could make a significant change within our communities. However, once again, that means that a lot more people would be making a lot less money. And it would make sure that it strikes another thing off so that they don't have something to dangle above the people's heads for the next election cycle. If we actually made changes, I think that a lot of people would lose a lot of their leverage in that regard. Because as long as you have something to run on, if you have a platform and you never actually change anything, then you can use that as a threat towards the working class people in order to say, well, you should vote for me because, oh, look at that other guy. Meanwhile, neither of them have an intention of change. Neither of them have the best intentions of the working class people in general. Neither of them, both of them are adherent to the singular party. I believe that both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party represent the interest of one party, and that is money making, quite frankly. And anybody who is reasonable in that regard would be able to see that for themselves. I believe that they see that every single day, whether they like to admit it or not. So yes, there's a lot of things that need to be changed. I believe that there's a lot of processes, especially in regards to the police and qualified immunity. There are a lot of things that could be changed there. There are a lot of people who have still gotten away with murder. However, because they had a badge when they did it, they have never had to see any sort of accountability to this day. So there are a lot of things to change, and if you have the time, we can run down the list. However, there's only so much time here.
Did you ever talk with Matt Alder or interacted with him at all before that day? Do you know who he was?
To my knowledge, no, not at all. I had actually been told that at one point in 2020, I had demonstrated alongside Mr. Alu, but Matt Alder, to my knowledge, I've never come across. There was one circumstance a while ago where, had to go to the hospital and visit a family member, and passing by, I thought I saw a person that looked like them, but like a material meeting, no. We've never had a discussion, never, to my knowledge, no. I mean, it's small lake city, so I've had various people that I know that have said, oh yeah, he was here, I knew this guy from here, he was a regular here, but him and I have never had any contact outside of that day.
But you learned you had protested with Alu.
Yes, ma'am.
Could
Yeah.
you share more about that?
Well, in regards to that, I honestly I couldn't recall because him and I never had like a formal meeting, but I mean, there were a lot of people that were in the movement against police brutality, in the Black Lives Matter movement, in the Justice for Bernardo movement. There were a lot of demonstrations and a lot of protests, of which I open carried in there, that there are a lot of people that I came across, and once this situation happened, were able to recognize me and go, oh, I knew that guy from then, I knew that guy from this one. But as far as, once again, a formal meeting and sitting down and having a conversation, I can't recall that ever happening between Mr. Alu and I. But somebody, friend of a friend in connection had said, yeah, apparently you guys were at the same demonstration. So, but I've been made aware, learning things later on, that he was also an activist. He was also very involved in the community, so I have no doubt in my mind that at some point we did cross paths, whether we knew it or not.
Have you talked with his family in these past 6 months? If so, what have those conversations been like?
No, sir. I haven't had any conversation with the family. Would they be willing? I would like to give them, obviously, the time to grieve, the time to process things. I do not want to overstep any boundaries whatsoever. But if at some point in the future they would like to have a discussion, I would like to be able to give in person my condolences, if nothing else.
Just quickly, something you just said. So open carrying, like you did at this protest, is not new, you've done that before?
That's correct. And the Salt Lake Tribune actually had an article that was put out that has pictures, videos of me doing this. There's a lot of incidents, and many of them also were not filmed or photographed. So this was not a rare occurrence by any means. This is something that was very frequent. It's something that I believe that, once again, like I said, I do not believe that the Second Amendment right is one that is restricted only to one particular political ideology. When somebody who is more on a right-leaning basis chooses and decides to utilize that same constitutional right, they are not questioned in the same regard that I have been as to, well, why would you do that? Because it's the natural human right that you have been given. As so long as you are acting in a peaceful manner and so long as you are not going with the intention of creating aggression, then you are well within your right. And that's something that actually I did not always start out that way. I began to open carry because of outside agitators, because of people who would show up to demonstrations, to marches, who had far more equipment than I had that day, who had far more of a very expressed verbally intent to try and do something against us and try and agitate people, rile people up, and create circumstances so that they could use a self-defense justification to fire into a crowd of people. That's when I decided, well, if they have just as much of a right to do that, and they are actually intending on that, they've made that very clear that they want to do something to us, then I have the right to defend myself.
Given that context, oh, sorry, go ahead.
So you've talked about, potential legal action given that pod and that money that you might not want to take. Beyond that, are there any certain steps that you want to take next regarding this incident? Any legal steps, any big life steps? This seems like something that would be quite the disruption. What is next for you?
To do whatever I can, to do whatever is in my capacity to make a good, positive change within my community, to help people. As far as the further legal matters of the circumstance, I cannot give you any details as of this moment. But I think that it's going to be a lot of healing, a lot of therapy. I've been put into a situation to where my name and face has been lambasted on like I said, an international scale. My life is forever changed. My life will never be the same. I can try and do my absolute best attempt at some sense of normalcy, but the reality of the matter is that has been stripped from me. Unfortunately, not to indict anybody else, but the media has had a very large hand in that they did not wait for the facts of the matter. They did not wait for the reality. In fact, they took the statements made by the very perpetrator and then used that to paint their narrative. So I am going to do a lot of work, but the reality of the situation also is that with the community support, with the love that is within my community, there are many people that know that that's not me, that knew from the very get that was bunk. So moving forward, I'm going to try and do whatever is in my capacity to get further education, try and get further training in certain areas, certificates, whatever the case may be, whatever it is that I'm looking towards. I've been looking at different things online as far as schooling goes, life skills and the like, trying to better myself physically, mentally, spiritually, and try and better the community around me. As far as, I'm learning on the fly, so I wish that I could give a more satisfying answer, but the reality of the matter is that if anybody else were in my circumstance, I think that they would be just as, lost as I find myself occasionally. So, but my intention is to keep doing the best that I can do.
Do you know whether you might be called to testify as a witness in the case against Matt Alder? I don't know if you can say that or if you've heard How do you feel about
We
that?
haven't been told that yet,
No?
Yeah.
but he certainly will testify truthfully if he's asked to. I
Do you
told the bar,
anticipate that will happen?
I don't think that he would be called as a witness. I don't know.
Representative Verona Maga is presenting a bill that would ban long rifles from public protests and such. Given your stance on weapons, do you have any comment on that?
I believe that it's unconstitutional. I believe that it's another thing. What I anticipate and what we are already seeing is bills in legislature that will inevitably make it harder and for dissent, that will make it more difficult for exploited people to resist against their exploitation. And it is not, they will claim that it is for the betterment of the people, they will claim that it is for safety, they will claim that it is within our best interest. However, at the end of the day, it will make it harder for us, the exploited communities, the working class people of the state and of the nation, to actually try and make material change. I would say that it's unconstitutional and that it should not be passed.
I told the bar we'd be wrapped up at 2, and it's 2. I know Arturo would be available individually if any of you want to contact him later, but I appreciate y'all being here today.
Where are you from, Arturo? Are you a local, are you a native Utah?
Born and raised.